Vanakkam. Welcome to this course on classics in neuroscience. In this video, in this series of videos, we are looking at the physiology of the synaptic potential and receptor potentials. In this video, we will look at the critical contributions of Bernard Katz towards understanding the function of the neuromuscular synapse and how A.V. Hill's support to Bernard Katz paved a crucial way for Bernard Katz to achieve what he could and what he ended up achieving. And we will also look at end plate potential and how communication between excitable cells happen through quanta or in bunches of molecules of the neurotransmitter. Like we know about the communication or action potential transmission within a neuron usually associated with Hodgkin and Huxley. We saw this in the previous week, that this contribution is the contribution of Alan Hodgkin and Andrew Huxley. Likewise, a major breakthrough to improve our understanding of the neuromuscular synapse or the neuromuscular junction came from the seminal contributions of Bernard Katz. Of course, he is a Nobel Prize winner. Do Google his page, do check his Wikipedia page, do check his Nobel Prize page. I have already mentioned this in the previous videos to check the trying circumstances under which Bernard Katz performed his work. So, Bernard Katz was born in Leipzig . Unfortunately, he did not have German citizenship because when he was born, Leipzig was under Russian hegemony. So, he was practically stateless when he was born. So, he first studied the classics, then he went to medical studies and he was attracted to natural sciences because he was interested in the process, in the scientific process. Specifically, he mentions that he realized the power and depth of scientific ideas and the continuous subjection to criticism and further trials by experiment. This is how science advances. So, he was very attracted because of this. Among his teachers was Hans Held, who was a reticularist opposed to Ramonica Hall. So, he was particularly attracted to neurophysiology because he was amazed that you could express the complex functional activity of living tissues through simple mathematical equations. This particularly attracted him to neurophysiology, and he worked on how muscles respond to stretching, and he had published a couple of articles in Fugler Archive. Probably not in English, probably in German. One has to check this. Do check this yourself, whether this was in German or in English. Likely it was in German. This had some good consequences for Katz. It did two things. One is it won him a research prize, and more importantly, he was noticed, or his work was noticed by the famous British physiologist A.V. Hill. As you know, A.V. is famous for his work on muscle function. He is also a Nobel laureate. He was famous for his work on muscle function. A.V. noticed the work of Bernard Katz. Okay, so that is somebody who is also working on muscle function. Also note if you read up about A.V. Hill, do Google about him, the legacy of A.V. Hill. There are some review papers on his work and on his life. Do Google them. I am not telling the whole story. If you read up about A.V. Hill, you will know that he was a vociferous critic of the Nazi regime, and he was someone who positively supported the immigration of scientists from Nazi occupied Germany to the West, to UK in particular. So, he was very vocal and he was more of an activist. He was like an activist who was pushing for this through his own power circles. Because Bernhard Katz was a Jew, he underwent too much persecution as a person of Jewish origin. He even considered at some point to immigrate to Palestine. We would not know what would have happened. What if he had emigrated to Palestine, what would have happened? We do not know that. Maybe he would have become the first Israeli Nobel Prize winner. We do not know that for sure. So, he interviewed with Chaim Weizmann, who knew A.V. Hill, and one of his teachers was kind enough to provide a letter of introduction to A.V. Hill, suggesting Bernhard Katz to move to the UK. So, that teacher was Martin Guildmeister. Actually, because he was stateless, he did not have proper travel documents, but fortunately he was provided with what is called as a Nansen pass, a green document that is provided to people after First World War, people who were stateless after First World War, to travel to other places. This Nansen pass was first advocated and promoted by this person Nansen, who also happens to be a neuroanatomist. Do read up about this. Bernhard Katz is a neurophysiologist. Nansen, of the famous Nansen pass, is a neuroanatomist. Do read up about this. Not much time on this. So, he eventually escaped to London and started collaborating with A.V. Hill. Essentially, he lived in A.V. Hill's laboratory practically during the wartime. Of course, there were many challenges to work during the war. We have discussed some of these things in the previous videos also. For example, when A.V. was requested to provide a review or a contributed article to the journal Ergebnisse der Physiology, it was passed on to Bernhard Katz by A.V. because somehow A.V. thought that Bernhard Katz might be a suitable person to author this article. But the journal said that it required an Aryan co-author. It required a non-Jewish person as a co-author at least, so that this paper could get published. Eventually, Bernhard Katz ended up publishing this as a monograph, suggesting the extraordinary amount of challenges that this person went through and the vicious attitude of even the academic circles towards Jewish people, something to keep in mind. Of course, during his stay in the UK, he had the opportunity to collaborate with some extraordinary individuals, some brilliant scientists, most notably Alan Hodgkin and Jack Eccles. Of course, A.V. Hill, of course. So, he spent some time in Australia working with Jack Eccles and spent some time in New Guinea as part of his military assignments for Australia. And after getting married, he was invited by A.V. Hill, not because of marriage, I think he was invited just after the war to be part of the leadership of his biophysics unit in London. So, he scrounged for equipment as we have seen in the previous videos, like Hodgkin did, and he started working with Hodgkin on the sodium current, for example. So, this work got good amount of attention. That is the Hodgkin and Katz paper of 1949. He continued to work on neuromuscular junction, and also remember his contribution to the GHK equation. We have discussed this in the previous videos and the previous weeks. The Goldman-Hodgkin-Katz equation, or the Goldman-Hodgkin-Katz constant field equation. We have seen this in the previous weeks. So, his major studies came from his work on neuromuscular junction, specifically on the synaptic quanta, which were later to come in the 1950s. So, something that we can learn from this individual's work is, regardless of the hardships that he went through, he maintained a positive attitude. Remember Viktor Frankl's famous quote, something that no one can take from us, the last of human freedoms, is how you respond to a given situation. The situation that you are having may not be completely because of your doing, maybe also because of your interaction with the universe, but how you respond to a given situation is completely in your hands. Right. So, something for us to keep in mind as we proceed with our own research. With this, we come to the end of this video. In this video, we looked at the major contributions of Bernard Katz and how essentially the crucial support from A.V. Hill and other scientists enabled Bernard Katz to do his groundbreaking work, and how maintaining a positive attitude regardless of the situation can help us to do well in research, not only in research but also in life in general. With this, we come to the end of this video. Thank you very much for your attention.